people in Pontiac would probably agree that if there were one thing symbolic in Pontiac's history, it would be the old mill. It is not merely nostalgic, then, to locate the origins of Pontiac down by the mill stream. Although the first known immigrant to Livingston County arrived in 1830, it was not until 1833 that a settler established his home within the present boundaries of Pontiac Township. In 1837, the county was established and the county seat was set in Pontiac. The streets were plotted at that time almost as they exist today. The surveyors at that time also were commissioned to set aside land for a courthouse square, the jail, and 6 acres for the establishment of a mill. The land which they set aside was situated directly on the banks of the Vermilion and comprised probably what is now this section of Water Street and the blocks immediately north of this section. The land for a mill was reserved where now Pontiac Savings and Loan stands. But not everyone agreed that the Pontiac location was the best for the county seat. The land was extremely marshy and wild. It was probably quite similar to what is known today as Howder's Ford. This spot on the Vermilion River was used extensively by the early settlers because there was a rock in the middle of the river, and this rock was a good gauge of whether the river was low enough to ford. When the rock could be seen, it was safe to cross. When it was under the water, the stream was impassable. The first courthouse was located on Madison Street, approximately due north of Evenglow Lodge. Although built originally on the site of the present courthouse, It was moved to where the Methodist Church now stands, and then finally moved to this location behind Evenglow Lodge. The second courthouse was built in 1857 and was used until it burnt on July 4th, 1874, the result of carelessly thrown firecrackers. The present structure was started immediately and has served the county ever since. This monument on the courthouse grounds was dedicated in 1903 by President Theodore Roosevelt. In 1853, 20 years after the first pioneers settled, the community consisted of only 6 buildings and less than a dozen families. Had the Chicago and Mississippi Railroad, later the Chicago and Alton, not established its line through Pontiac, it is doubtful that the community could have survived. The first train went through the town on July 4th, 1854, and within a year, the community had grown to 300. Truly, Pontiac exists today because of the railroad. Fortunately, the Alton, now the GM&O, has had a longer history than the interurban, which ran between Pontiac and Dwight between 1905 and 1925. The line came into downtown Pontiac along Washington Street and then headed north on Main Street. During those 20 years, a pleasant Sunday outing was a ride on the interurban to Dwight, a visit to an ice cream parlor, and then return to Pontiac. The last interurban passed through Pontiac in 1925. Obviously, no community established in the early 19th century could still be thriving without the introduction of industry. Much of Pontiac's economy in the last 20 years has been based on the industrial growth which the community has enjoyed. With the introduction of new technology and different needs, however, the earliest industries in Pontiac, one by one, have been replaced with others. Some of the early industries were converted, however, and are still operating. The early Pontiac shoe factory opened in these quarters in 1889 and now house the Brockton Heel Factory. For 90 years, until 1964, shoe manufacturing was an important part of Pontiac's industrial scene. Some industries, however, have left nothing to indicate their existence here. For example, the Pontiac cereal mill. Other industries have left footprints behind them. Coal mine shafts, such as these, were abundant from 1866 on into the early 20th century. But along North Aurora Street, where they were once located, there is nothing left but undergrowth, ponds, and newer business enterprises. Utilities came early to Pontiac and, like industry, have undergone quite a few changes. The early light plant stood where now the water company stands. And all that was left of the early waterworks shown in this picture was the standpipe, which until 1974 was a mark on Pontiac's horizon. Rusted, worn, an anachronism in the 1970s, it was torn down. There can be no doubt, however, that an ear of corn represents the continuing economy of Pontiac and the surrounding area. This has been true from the very beginning. One of the earliest commercial ventures in Pontiac has survived as a symbol of the community. In 1837, James McKee and C.H. Perry constructed a mill on the Vermilion and also built the first dam. From that time on until the mill burnt in 1955, there was a mill on that spot. This particular photograph was taken during the construction of the present Mill Street Bridge. Today, all that remains is the dam, and for many people, a very pleasant memory. A great boost to local pride and economy came with the selection of Pontiac as the location of the State Reformatory for Boys. The reformatory was established in 1869 and building was completed in 1870. The State School for Boys was located at the south end of Vermilion Street, then known as the Avenue. At the turn of the century, the lawns surrounding the institution made it one of the handsomest spots in Pontiac. Until 1891, the school admitted males only up to the age of 16. After 1891, young men up to the age of 21 were admitted. And only in recent years was the institution changed to penitentiary status, admitting offenders of any age. But no one should be led to believe that Pontiac's founders were concerned only with industry and labor. The river served as a central point of amusement, and boating was an extremely common and highly enjoyed activity. Perhaps the recently inaugurated canoe races indicate a new interest in the Vermilion. The river, of course, was what attracted the first settlers to the area and served to keep them here. It was never really commercially important, nor with the early arrival of the railroad did it have to be navigable for shipping. During the Chautauqua seasons, the river was also used as a means of transportation to the park area. Though located only 2 blocks from downtown Pontiac, people still would board boats at the old mill and ride to the Chautauqua site. Canoe races were not the first races run in Pontiac. Over 80 years ago, just east of the standpipe at the old waterworks, the racetrack provided entertainment many summer afternoons. Horse carriages would transport the fans to the track from the north side of the courthouse, and more than likely, the track served as a center for several 4th of July celebrations, just as it was doing in these photographs taken in 1890. This is not an association of individuals, each of whom is trying to see what he can get for himself against the other. This is an association of men imbued with the idea that the greatest good to each is the common good of all. Or, to put it another way, the common good of the community is, in the end, the greatest good to each individual. This creed of Chautauqua certainly stands as the goal for any community. Chautauqua came to Pontiac in 1898, and for 30 years it served as a great source of education, culture, and entertainment for the area. Originating as a training experience for Sunday school teachers, it soon broadened to include such things as homemaking skills, educational lectures, and light entertainment. Pontiac Chautauqua was located in Riverview Park, now Chautauqua Park, and its meetings were held in the building which now houses the Vermilion Players Summer Theater Group. Tents were erected throughout the park, and many visitors spent the full week camping out. Not all the programs were strictly cultural. This photograph, dating from 1913, shows a roundup of Ford automobiles on display for the Chautauqua goers. Muggs Landing and Horseshoe Bend and other points along the river made Chautauqua in the park all the more inviting. But just as industry changes, so does taste in entertainment. By 1928, Chautauqua had run its course, and Pontiac citizens were taking their amusement in other ways. In the pool, just 3 years old, to name but one spot. Buildings and streets change. Some buildings go, never to be replaced. Others can be recognized. This, the old Public Service Company building, can easily be recognized as now part of Evenglow Lodge. Other buildings are torn down and rebuilt. The churches in Pontiac are examples of this replacement. The City Hall, which was built in 1900, can still be recognized today. This is the old Pontiac Library. It stands on the site of the present Pontiac Library building. And from the very beginning, the square has served as the focal point for all of Pontiac's activities. Madison Street has changed only in appearance. The same is true of Washington Street. This photograph from the turn of the century can even today be recognized as part of Mill Street. Education came to Pontiac in 1843 in the person of Samuel Ladd, an immigrant from Connecticut. He held classes in the courthouse, and though believing in the value of education, it was a sideline to his clothing business. It was not until the 1870s, with the incorporation of the town, that education came into its own. Education's history in Pontiac must now include the short-lived Winston Churchill College, which occupied the site of the former high school building. With the demolition of Winston Churchill College, all school buildings standing in the city have been built within the past 25 years. It is obvious, however, that the greatest visible change in the community has taken place in the business area. This is a view of the stage in the Folk Opera House. The Opera House served as a center for culture, entertainment, dances, lodge initiations, and commencements. During the night of March 24th, 1923, the building was destroyed by fire. Today, the Pontiac Monument Company occupies the spot on Water Street, which formerly housed the Folk Opera House. Many people have believed that Grace Episcopal Church was one of the most beautiful buildings in Pontiac. It was torn down when the congregation decided to build a new church south of town. Located in approximately the same area, but earlier than the old Grace Episcopal Church, was one of the first fire department buildings in Pontiac. This is the location today. Many other old photographs of Pontiac can still be seen and recognized in today's community. Settled in 1837, named after the Indian chief by Jesse Fell, incorporated in 1872, Pontiac has a history which credits well for the perseverance of the community's forebears. Approximately 5 miles to the west, a rival community thrived in the 1850s, Richmond, Illinois. Not a trace of it remains. But Pontiac has grown. Knowing what might have been, the community should look to its past, and the community does. The Threshermen's Reunion annually invites thousands of people to turn back a bit to see what it was once like, to compare with the present. But the community cannot continually look back. The last 100 years have resulted not from looking back, but from looking ahead. As long as there are citizens in the 1970s who look ahead and seek development, as there were in the 1870s, Pontiac can continue to thrive. The development of the village by the mill stream, the development of any community, is never an accidental thing. The immigrants in 1830 were Pontiac's pioneers for the future. The men who incorporated the town in 1872 were the first community developers looking toward the new century. In the 1970s, we should take to heart the words of Chautauqua. The common good of the community is, in the end, the greatest good for each individual.